We're going to get started. Today we have lots of information from one of our teams. So if you want to talk up today's session on social media, use the hashtag xAPI Cohort, tag the gnome, xAPI gnome, or tag Torrance Learning, and then tag our presenters too. I'm sure they'll share their contact. So we're in the 11th week of Cohort, and I think for us it's about the 3rd or 4th week of working from home and staying at home. So we hope that everyone is doing well. We have seen some things pop up in Cohort and affecting the team, so we're sending out well wishes, and we are really grateful for folks to be able to engage virtually in Cohort through this very flexible model. Next fall, we will also have our 11th session of Cohort. It begins on September 5th. Sign-ups for next session's Cohort will be available soon. It will be on xapicohort.com. And today we're going to have Team Smartbuilder demo their project. We'll talk a lot about the xAPI party. And right now we're at 499 registered for Cohort, which is awesome. So behind the mics today, we have Aaron and Jamie, our producers, who are making sure that things run smoothly and the recording is running. So thank you, Jamie and Aaron. And then I'm Jess. I'm your host. And I'm glad to be here with you today. So today we have project team demos, and we also have project team demos next week, and then we'll talk about the party and how that's another opportunity to demo the work you've been accomplishing on Cohort. So your teams are in this what's in it for me, but a good thing to be thinking about at this point is, can this project continue on next semester? Is there some other things I want to try and iterate and break and try again? And how can I continue to build on that? Those are some good thoughts to be having right now. Also sharing out your work with other folks, so demonstrating what you've been learning, what has been difficult, and using every opportunity to share that out is a great resource professionally, because you'll have lots of folks that can offer feedback. Last semester we had 4 of our teams get featured on different podcasts, so you never know who's watching, you never know who can help support, make the project happen, and it's just a great opportunity to continue showing your work out to everyone. So with that, I'm going to pass over the mic to Team Smartbuilder.
Super. Thank you. I'll just wait for the screen to pop up. Wonderful. Thank you. So my name is Peter Hams. I am part of Team Smartbuilder. I'm going to talk a little bit today about our reasoning behind what we've been doing and how we're using it to help facilitate better conversations on our teams here, but also within our organization. And so a little bit about us, Team Smartbuilder here. Myself, Peter, Jason Baker, and Steve Laurent all have been working together for quite some time. And we come from a background that's really been focused on SCORM, and specifically SCORM CMI interactions. And Izzy has joined our team to help us understand xAPI a little bit better. And that's really the reasoning behind our project here. We wanted to take our understanding about data that can be generated from a course and kind of take that to the next level. xAPI is obviously the thing that we're focused on here, and so that's what our project has really been all about, understanding the data that comes from a course, how it's being passed via xAPI, and how we can use visualization and reporting to better understand that data. And in the end, after this project's over, we're going to use that to support our conversations within our own organization to help people understand better about this technology and about how we could potentially use it in the future and all of the cool things that it could do. So that's a little bit about us. I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about what we've done here and what we've uncovered and all the really neat things that we didn't know before that we now know now. So we'll kick it off. I'll hand it over to the rest of the team. Jason?
Great, thanks a lot, Pete. Okay, so I think as Pete says, we've started off not knowing a great deal about xAPI, at least from a technology perspective. I think we've seen the need in our business for a long time. We are pushing SCORM, to its limits and probably far beyond it, and we're doing that at some quite significant scale. So Cohort, really provided an opportunity for us to start to learn about new technologies and start to apply it to our use case. So our goals for Team Smartbuilder to LRS, as we imaginatively called ourselves, are pretty much what it says in that team name. We wanted to work out how do you actually get an authoring tool to send xAPI calls. We wanted to connect that tool to an external learner record store and find out, how difficult is this? What are the pitfalls? What do you need to know in order to be able to do that? And then I think, what's really important to us, we're in the ethics and compliance business, and a lot of that is about doing the right thing and managing risk. So what we wanted to be able to do is to say, if we can actually create and generate some really meaningful and valuable data from the experiences that our learners consume, and be able to present that data in a meaningful way and an insightful way that actually gives some data to make some decisions from. So the final part was we wanted to see how can we build some dashboards that really provide those meaningful and actionable insights. So that's really where we started. We were kind of lucky that we'd already had a prototype in development, a competency assessment prototype, which was doing all the hard instructional design side of things. But really, it's this ideal vehicle, for our team to actually start exploring in xAPI, because we already had something which is generating lots and lots of meaningful and insightful data. So, I mean, just to give you an idea, this assessment basically produces scores for 24 questions. All these questions are specifically aligned to specific competencies, and those competencies are divided into multiple levels. So there's a lot of data points, out of one completion of this assessment. So in many ways, it was ideal for this project, because we had something that was producing that meaningful data. So we could actually try to connect it up to an LRS and try to make sense of the data that we got out of it in ways that we really have not been able to do so effectively or efficiently with the old SCORM world. So really, we started out, within Smartbuilder, looking at what are the various tools available, to actually start to add xAPI into the experiences that we were creating. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Smartbuilder as a tool, but for non-programmers like me, this kind of Lego actions system that they've got is particularly handy and logical, and it really provides a great way to access this kind of functionality very quickly. So we started learning how to do it, and we started creating our first actions that started being able to send xAPI statements. So as you can see here, we're able to set an actor, with a mailbox and a name, and then we can send, a statement to a particular activity and giving a particular result. So this was just a little test that we did, one of the many tests that we did, And as you can see, when we then looked in Smart Tracker, which is the integrated learner record store that you get along with Smartbuilder. We're not affiliated or endorsed by Smartbuilder, we're just fans of theirs. You can kind of see how this was actually pushed back to us in the statement. So we've got our response here, we've got our actor here, and there's the ID. So we thought, great, we've made a great start to this process. We started connecting up the whole of the assessment, all of those 50-odd data points that I talked about previously using this method, and we were successfully getting that communicating with the Smart Tracker learning record store, and we thought, this is easy. What's all the fuss about? So the next step is, we thought, okay, that's working with Smart Tracker, which is integrated with Smartbuilder, is one thing. How can we actually start working with an external learner record store that's hosted somewhere differently, that's not, which Smartbuilder wasn't specifically designed to work with? So again, we researched into that, and we started to learn all about endpoints. And endpoints basically, within the JavaScript code of a Smartbuilder published course, we see that there are endpoints, which is basically where you point it towards the particular learner record store, and then you've got your authentication elements here. So again, we thought this sounds pretty straightforward, so we found out what our endpoint was and our various authentication data, and things started going very weird. We started still capturing data in Smart Tracker when we thought we were capturing data in Learning Locker. And it took a bit of digging around until we realized that there was actually a rogue redirect, as you can see in this top line here, which, even though we were launching launching the course and thinking it was pointing towards Smartbuilder, it was actually reverting back to the published course on Smart Tracker. So it simply required just a couple of forward slashes to comment that out, and then miraculously that all worked. So yeah, there was a lot of fiddling around and finding a fairly simple solution, but throughout all of this we were learning how do you get these different systems to talk to each other.
So my name is Izzy, and as Pete sort of mentioned in the introduction, I'm the only one that doesn't work at, I don't work with these guys, but I served as a, I guess sort of an advisor on xAPI, because I've done some other xAPI projects before. And so my contribution to this team was primarily centered around, okay, Jason just kind of walked us through how we get statements from Smartbuilder into Learning Locker, which was our LRS. And then what was happening after that was that Steve would then take those and build dashboards within Learning Locker. And we were able to make that whole process flow more or less okay. But as we got into the details of those dashboards, one of the things that we encountered was we couldn't really segment the data in exactly the way that we wanted. So one of the things that I had noticed was that we were actually capturing two components inside of a single field. So if you look at that highlighted section in that red box, you can see that the object ID that we were using essentially ended in competency 4_level 5. The numbers don't really matter, but just know that what we were trying to do is capture competency and level as separate items, separate things that we wanted to show in our dashboards. But here you can see that they were captured both within a single field in our xAPI. So if you can move on to the next slide for me. So what I suggested was, can we get our xAPI statements into a format that actually breaks up the two into their own separate areas? So can we get competency and can we get level into two separate areas of the xAPI statement? So this is a screenshot of what I sent over to Jason to potentially discuss with Smartbuilder, the team at Smartbuilder, to see if that's something that they could potentially build or know how to build or advise us on how we could build it. So what you can see is that this whole area, this whole thing is really like the context, and context is sort of an optional section of an xAPI statement. So the way that you have actor, verb, object, you can also have a context section of your statement. So what I did was I looked into the xAPI spec a little bit, and I know that there are these two sections within the context. You can add in a grouping area or a category area. And really, what's the difference between the two? Well, the category is essentially intended to hold, if you're using like an xAPI profile, for example, like the MI5 or like the video profile, that's really what that category area is intended for. And then the grouping is sort of more open-ended. It's kind of just any way that you can imagine that you want to group your activities together later on. So as an example, if you have multiple courses that are all part of a curriculum, maybe you'd want to include your curriculum inside of that grouping area so that in your LRF you can then query based on that curriculum and get all of the courses related to that curriculum. So these were the suggested things that, this was sort of the suggested approach that I mentioned to Jason, and we took that over to Smartbuilder, and I think that they had told us that really wasn't a thing. So instead, Jason went back and he said, okay, I'm going to rework these a little bit. And so what he was able to do was actually look at the object, and he actually played around a little bit more with Smartbuilder. And, despite the fact that Jason says that he's a non-coder, actually he made some pretty sophisticated, there was some pretty sophisticated logic in those blocks. So what he was able to do was use the object ID, use the object name, and use the object description fields and customize them so that they could hold, basically so that it solved for the structural problem that I was seeing, where we weren't able to segment the competency and the levels into separate fields within the xAPI statement. So that's kind of what you're looking at there. You can see the ID is highlighted at the top, the name is the next thing that's highlighted, and then the description is the next thing. So we were playing around essentially with how could we rename these? Should we put the competency as the name? Should we put the level as the description? And this was just a screenshot of when we were kind of playing around with that.
Lovely, thanks a lot, Izzy. Yeah, and I think this kind of highlights what I love about Cohort, is we had a solution, and it's a solution that kind of worked, and we'd learned something, but having Izzy on the team was fantastic because, he really helped us kind of think about it differently, brought some real expertise to the table, and kind of helped us take it to the next level, which is great. And I mean, this is kind of where we took that first statement, and I think the point Izzy was making about context was, was really key to this. We were capturing a value for a particular variable, to kind of use language that I understand. And what Steve was finding is when he was trying to report on this, there wasn't that contextual information that was necessary to be able to give us meaningful insights, within our reporting and reporting dashboards. So I inspired and informed by Izzy's guidance, I had another crack at it. I reached out to the Smartbuilder guys, and they were extremely helpful as always to suggest alternative ways of perhaps looking at this. And this is one of the this is the solution of how we kind of expanded that particular statement by using a choice activity setup where we're actually able to create a map with, with the ID, which is what we had previously. So the ID for this particular activity is competency underscore level 1 underscore rating, but we were able to give it a more human consumable name of competency 1 level 1 rating, and also a description where we're actually able to say what level 1 actually is, which is in this case awareness. So all of this is captured in the statement. So you can see we've got the actor being set up there, and then within the statement we get the actor appearing there. Then the verb is answered, and this particular Lego block is specifically for answered, though there are plenty of other blocks available that we could have used. And then in terms of the object itself, all of these down here, this is the object. So as I said before, the ID is there, the name comes out here, the rating, so that's the description comes down there. So all of this was available in the xAPI statement. But in addition to that, not only, of course, do we have the response, which is kind of essential here, but we were also able to supply effectively what the 4 categories of competence are. So you can see here, ID number 1, unconscious incompetent, that was pulled from here. So all 4 levels are actually within the statement. So again, Steve has that data that he's actually able to pull out when building the dashboards. So I think then it's kind of over to the fun bit now, and the exciting stuff, to actually see how Steve made some sense of this with the dashboards in Learning Locker.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So yeah, as we started, we had some challenges building out the insights that we really wanted, but thanks to Izzy's advice to had the ability to independently target the data points that we really needed and wanted. In this case here, the activity, the level, and the competency. So designing these dashboards to display these meaningful insights became much more possible to achieve. And on the slide here, in this dashboard here, what we're doing is breaking down per competency a view of each of the 5 different levels and applying our ratings to them. So with that along the top, you can also see what we did was we dedicated individual dashboards for each of the 4 core competencies within our content. As Jason mentioned, Smartbuilder, to the Smart Tracker LRS was, pretty easy to do. But part of, what we're exploring here, wanted to achieve is branching that out, looking for a different endpoint, a different LRS to make that connection, explore the tools, and kind of have some of that fun, right? See what we can do with that data. And in Learning Locker, dashboards are created and compiled with individual components called visualizations, or we sometimes refer to them as widgets. And in Learning Locker, there's some pretty helpful and really easy to use widget creation tools. In this example here, first things first, right? We established the widget's x-axis and y-axis by selecting the targeted data points that we wanted. So in this example, the activity for our x-axis and our y-axis. And in both cases, optionally, we can utilize the default labels that come through right out of the statements, but we can also set custom labels, which is pretty helpful. In this example, we left the x-axis to the default, just pulled through right out of the statement, came through as risk, but we did apply custom labels to the y-axis. So those user profiles, just label them as people. Thank you. All right. So once we've declared and established our x and y axes, then we move on to define our individual series to include within each of these visualizations and establish for each of the different series a specific query. And what we did in this example is for each of the series, we wanted a query on a particular. So to do that, utilizing the context additions that Izzy advised and Jason was able to build in, it was pretty easy for us to target the activity and the response for each of our series queries. And in that hover over label, you can kind of see that pretty clearly. We have the name of that individual activity, as well below that the summarized responses that we wanted to target. Slide, Jason. And then finally, this is kind of the fun part for me, and I think we learned a lot here, is Learning Locker allows you to use the UI tools, but optionally, we can also choose to build out our queries per series using xAPI statements. And we found that this is a pretty helpful way to continue building a level of familiarity with xAPI statement structure, as we are continuing to learn in general what xAPI is beyond just the standard score model, which we're very, very familiar with. And with that, we'll say thank you for the time to present today and happy to answer any questions.
Hot. Thanks, team. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I am interested mostly from a cohort perspective. Izzy, you hopped on the team to serve in this advisor role. Can you tell me a little bit about how that worked with the team compared to other cohorts? I'm just interested in that structure.
Yeah, sure. Basically, I just I sat in on the meetings that we had on a weekly basis. I kind of heard through what the team was up to. It was sort of, I guess, I had intended to have a more active role, but just due to time constraints on my end, I just didn't have the time. So, and also there was some access issues to certain things. So it ended up just working out better anyway because I didn't have to do any of the actual work, but I just kind of talk through the team, some of the issues they were having, and I was able to just consult on next steps that I would recommend.
That's so awesome. I think this is the beauty of Cohort, is that you get access to more experienced folks and new folks can come in and ask questions, and I like how you incorporated that structure into your team this year. It looks like there is a question that came in for you from Brian. Was the Learning Locker docs able to guide you generating reports from the xAPI statements and context?
Yeah, that's a great question. Full disclosure, I didn't actually use many of the Learning Locker docs. What Jason and the team that I had access to were resources right out of Learning Locker. So I actually reached out via email a couple times and was able to get some really helpful support back through those channels. But Learning Locker docs actually be pretty open to taking a look at those and seeing what's in there. But overall, it was a great experience working with them. They were very helpful for us.
Awesome, and you got some positive feedback about you. Graphics and arrows on the slide to help understand the relationships and customization better. That was really great. Seeing as there's no more questions, I'm going to transition back to talk a little bit about the xAPI party. Thank you, Team Smartbuilder, for presenting out all of your learning. This was really, really great and helpful.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Especially a special thanks to Izzy, too. It's fantastic working with him.
Oh, thank you. It was great working with you guys, too. I really had a great time.
I love to hear it. I love it. I love it. So just wanted to remind you that our xAPI party is Friday, May 7th. Right now I'm going to put in the chat the link for our call for proposals. If you are wanting to present during the xAPI party, this is a great opportunity for you. There's this misconception that there's only one demo opportunity in Cohort, and that's during these last 2 weeks, but the party gives teams a few more weeks to work on, and you're welcome, that's on purpose, to work on your projects and get ready for the presentation. It's also open to a much broader audience of people who are genuinely curious about what people do in Cohort. So they have a lot of interest in your projects. They have a lot of insight they can offer. It's good publicity for your career. You'll get great questions and feedback that can help you spark future iterations. And everyone that knows that these are learning prototypes and they're done with volunteers and using free resources and borrowed time. So there's no worry about any judgment, or it doesn't have to be perfect. So we want to make sure that if you're interested in presenting at the party, go for it. The link is in the chat, and we make sure that we give precedence to cohort teams to present. We want you to have a lot of time to present. So you'll get 20 minutes or 45 minutes if you'd like a longer time slot. And you just need to fill out the form with all your info if you're interested. If you need, for any reason, because party is an all full day conference, if you need information to help your employer about the event and let them know that it's actually a conference and not a party, then we can also help there. Just send me a Slack message or an email. Are there any questions about the party, how to sign up, what it is? Alrighty. Given that, I want to remind you of how to log into these web sessions. And then next week we have 4 teams that have signed up. We have Team Makey Makey, Team Early Childhood Education, Team Adaptive Learning, and Team Audio Video. And the time slots are there on the screen. Again, you can sign up for cohort, for fall cohort. By the end of this week, the sign up will be released. You can sign up for the party there. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email or message me in Slack. That being said, continue to stay safe, and let us know if you have any questions about demos or the xAPI party. Thanks.